Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're plunging headfirst into something huge, really reshaping the global landscape.
Mm,
India's emergence, not just as a rising power, we've heard that for ages, but as this unapologetically independent global force.
that's right. The shift over the last, say, 2 decades has been dramatic.
Yeah, from rising to, what are they calling it now? A critical actor.
Exactly. A critical actor in global geopolitics. It's undeniable.
And that's the core of what we want to unpack today, isn't it? What's really driving this? And crucially, why is India increasingly assertive? Why does it seem, unwilling to just fall in line with Western expectations on so many issues?
From trade to geopolitics, yeah. It's a consistent pattern.
So our mission here is to get under the hood of India's strategic autonomy. We want to explore the foundations of this new confidence. Where does it come from?
On bedrock, yeah.
And then look at specific times, specific examples where India has consciously pushed back against what the West expected.
Because those moments really highlight the strategy in action.
It really begs a fascinating question for all of us, doesn't it? How does a nation actually pull this off? Charting such an independent course in a world still sort of dominated by established powers.
Where alignment is often the default, or at least the expectation.
Right. And maybe more importantly, what does this really mean for you, listening to this, trying to make sense of international relations today?
How does this shift affect the global picture? Let's get into it.
Okay, so where do we start? These pillars of confidence, as you called them.
Right. It's not just one thing. It's a convergence of factors that have strengthened India's hand over time. These are, tangible things driving this confidence.
Not just abstract ideas.
No, not at all. They are the real reasons behind this emboldened stance, this willingness to push back. Understanding these is absolutely key to grasping the whole strategic autonomy concept.
Okay, so pillar number one, you hinted at it earlier.
The economy. Rapid economic growth. It's arguably the most foundational piece.
And we're not just talking a few good quarters, right? This is sustained expansion.
Exactly. Significant long-term growth that gives India real leverage and, crucially, self-reliance.
Self-reliance, meaning they can make choices without worrying so much about external pressure.
Precisely. Think about it. If your domestic economy is strong, if you're less dependent on foreign aid or loans, you have more freedom. You can afford to say no sometimes, even to powerful nations, without fearing, immediate economic backlash.
They've built their own engine, basically.
They really have. And this economic muscle translates directly into geopolitical influence. It's very practical.
How so?
Well, a strong economy lets you invest. Invest in your own defense, your own technology, your own infrastructure. That reduces reliance on others even further.
Right, you're not waiting for handouts or needing external security guarantees quite as much.
Exactly. And for a country the size of India, nearly a $4 trillion economy heading towards becoming the third largest, that provides a huge cushion. Resilience.
Resilience against pressure, against potential coercion.
Yes. It's not just wealth for wealth's sake. It's the sovereignty that comes with that financial independence. It lets India dictate terms more often, or at least resist terms it doesn't like. It's a critical enabler.
Okay, so economic strength is the foundation. What's next? Hand in hand with that, you mentioned.
Strategic military modernization. This has been a continuous, multi-decade effort.
Updating and strengthening their defense forces.
Right. Massive investment, which obviously helps with national security, deterrence in the region, all that.
Sure, that's the primary goal.
But beyond just defense, having a modern, capable military gives a nation immense confidence. It affects how you approach strategic decisions globally.
It's not just about protecting borders, it's about projecting influence, having your voice heard.
Absolutely. And critically, ensuring you don't have to rely solely on someone else for your core security needs. Military strength underpins diplomatic leverage. It's that simple.
If you can defend yourself.
If you can defend yourself independently, without needing guarantees from just one specific power bloc, you are inherently more autonomous.
And we see that in their procurements, right? They buy from everyone.
Look at the diversity. French Rafales, Russian S-400s, American P-8Is.
Drones from the U.S. too, I believe.
Yes. And alongside all that, massive investment in their own programs. The Tejas fighter, the BrahMos missile, nuclear subs.
The Ariane class.
Right. This isn't accidental. It's a deliberate strategy to avoid over-reliance on any single country.
Spreading the risk, maintaining options.
Exactly. And that creates a deep sense of national self-assurance that you see reflected in their foreign policy. They act with more conviction.
Okay, so economy, military. What's the third pillar?
Diplomatic agility.
Yeah.
especially in this increasingly multipolar world we're in.
Multipolar meaning power isn't just in Washington or Beijing anymore.
Precisely. It's diffused.
Yeah.
Several influential centers. And India has become remarkably adept at navigating this complex web of relationships.
Forming partnerships across different groups.
Yeah, look at the Quad with the U.S., Japan, Australia. Very strategic. But at the same time, they maintain strong engagement with Russia. They're active in BRICS, the SCOA.
Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with China and Russia.
Correct. And they do all this without exclusively committing to any single bloc. It's a truly multipolar approach.
How does that work in practice? How do they leverage that?
Well, instead of being forced into a zero-sum game, you're either with us or against us. India engages strategically with multiple players.
Getting benefits from different relationships.
Exactly, without sacrificing core interests. Take the Quad, often seen as balancing China. But India still deepens economic ties with China and refuses any explicit anti-China military pact.
So flexibility is key.
Maximum flexibility. Avoiding entanglement in rivalries that don't directly serve their goals, preserving their room to maneuver. It's pragmatic, sophisticated foreign policy. Maximize options, don't limit them.
And the final piece, you mentioned leadership.
Yes, we can't really discuss this shift without considering Prime Minister Modi's leadership. His tenure has definitely seen India take much more assertive stands globally. Definitely. Explicitly refusing to take sides in global conflicts, like Ukraine. Effectively leveraging its demographic and market power in negotiations. A very clear India-first posture.
And that sets the tone for the specific examples we'll get into, the pushback.
Absolutely. It signals a clear intent. Prioritize India's interests, defined by India above all else, often framed with, national pride and civilizational identity.
It's not just rhetoric either, is it?
No. Under Modi, there's been a consistent articulation of national interest and, crucially, a willingness to act on it decisively, even when it pushes against traditional partners.
Like the Make in India push in defense.
Exactly. Or the firm stance in trade talks, the proactive outreach to the global south. It all reflects this bolder, more self-assured approach. This leadership style is a significant factor in how India executes its strategic autonomy.
Okay, so that brings us right to the heart of it, this philosophy of strategic autonomy. This is where the rubber meets the road, where the friction starts, particularly with the West.
It really is. We've laid out how India has become stronger, more confident, more agile.
But that independence bumps up against certain expectations, doesn't it? Especially from traditional powers.
Yes, the core discrepancy is pretty fundamental. It comes down to different historical outlooks, different paradigms.
How so?
Western nations, particularly the U.S. and EU, often operate from a history where allies and partners are kind of expected to align, maybe not 100%, but significantly. Align on geopolitical goals, foreign policy.
That's sort of team mentality, based on shared values or common threats.
Right, which they believe should lead to unified action, clear alignment. That's very different from India's own history.
Post-colonial non-alignment, you mean?
Exactly. That legacy feeds into its current commitment to an independent path. It sees alignment differently.
And this expectation from the West, it really ramped up recently during certain crises.
Definitely. Specific flashpoints brought it into sharp focus. The Russia-Ukraine war is the prime example.
Right. Immediate, intense pressure for India to condemn Russia explicitly.
The expectation was clear. India, as a democracy, as a growing partner, should fall in line with the Western stance, join the sanctions.
But that wasn't the only pressure point.
No. The U.S.-China rivalry is another huge one. Washington often frames this as the defining geopolitical struggle.
And they want India to pick a side, to be a firm counterweight to China.
There's certainly that expectation. Explicitly align with the West to contain Beijing, particularly in the Indo-Pacific.
We also see friction in climate talks, right?
Consistently. Western nations push for certain emission targets, certain policy frameworks.
And India pushes back.
Yes, arguing, along with other developing nations, that these frameworks don't adequately account for historical emissions by industrialized countries or their own current development needs. Poverty reduction is still a massive priority.
The whole common but differentiated responsibilities argument.
Exactly. It often clashes with demands for uniform commitments.
And then there's trade and tech.
Right. A push for Western-centric rules, market access demands.
Which India sees as potentially harmful to its own industries or its digital sovereignty goals.
Precisely. These aren't small disagreements. They touch on fundamental differences in how India sees its national interest versus how the West sees global economic order and regulation. Real friction points.
But what's absolutely crucial here, and the sources really stress this, is the why. India insists its pushback isn't just defiance, right? Not anti-Westernism.
Well, that's the core argument they make consistently. It's not about defiance for its own sake. It's singularly about prioritizing national interest first.
Pure pragmatism.
Essentially, yes, a self-serving, independent approach they believe any sovereign nation has the right to pursue. They'd argue the West does the same.
So what does national interest first mean in concrete terms for India?
It means securing energy for a massive growing population, ensuring economic stability and growth for 1.4 billion people, protecting complex borders.
And fostering their own tech, their digital independence?
Exactly. Regardless of external pressure or ideological alignments. It means keeping the flexibility to deal with all major powers, West, East, Global South, without being boxed in by alliances that might not serve today's needs.
That's the foundation of strategic autonomy.
Absolutely. Understanding that principle, that cold realist calculation, is key to making sense of India's actions that sometimes look unaligned or even contradictory from a Western perspective.
Okay, let's look at a specific case study then. The Russia-Ukraine war. You said this was a pivotal moment.
It truly was. It starkly highlighted India's commitment to this independent path, and frankly, it surprised many in the West.
How did that surprise manifest?
Well, from day one of the full-scale invasion, February 2022, the U.S. and EU expected unambiguous support for Ukraine, condemnation of Russia.
Because India is a democracy and a partner.
That was the logic. They thought India would naturally align with the democratic West against what they saw as a blatant violation of sovereignty and international law. The diplomatic calls from Washington from Brussels were intense.
But India's response was different.
Quite different. It adopted and maintained a remarkably neutral position, despite all that pressure.
And crucially, kept buying Russian oil.
Yes, often at significant discounts, prioritizing its own energy security, its economic stability, over joining Western sanctions or issuing outright condemnations. This directly contradicted expectations.
Which must have caused confusion, frustration in the West.
Absolutely. Conflicting interpretations flared up immediately. For many Western observers, India's stance looked like complicity, or at best, an unprincipled neutrality that weakened the global response to Russia.
A failure to stand up for democratic values.
That was the narrative in some quarters. They struggled to understand why this strategic partner wasn't fully on board with what they saw as a moral and geopolitical necessity. Opportunistic, even disloyal, those words were used.
But India saw it very differently.
Completely differently. As the sources show, India framed it as pure realism, a cold calculation of its own vital interests.
Not an ideological or moral question for them in the same way.
Not primarily. They had very clear, pragmatic arguments, voiced very forcefully by External Affairs Minister Jaishankar and others.
What were the main points?
First and foremost, energy security cannot be sacrificed. Simple as that.
As a massive oil importer.
The world's third largest consumer, importing over 80% of its oil. Affordable energy is paramount for economic growth, for stability, for the lives of millions. Disrupting that for a distant conflict. Unthinkable, they argued.
Okay, energy security. What else?
Second, every country has the right to independent diplomacy. This goes right back to strategic autonomy, the right to make foreign policy based on their assessment of their interests, not external dictates or moralizing.
They saw the pressure as infringing on their sovereignty.
Essentially, yes. And third, and this was quite pointed, Western countries also act in their national interest. Why should India be different?
Throwing the argument back at them. Challenging perceived hypocrisy.
Exactly. Highlighting potential double standard. What's principled action for the West is somehow self-serving or problematic when India does it. That resonated.
And the remarkable thing is, they stuck to it.
They absolutely held firm. Despite pressure from the highest levels, President Biden, European leaders, through calls, summits, public statements, New Delhi just didn't budge.
Continued buying oil, maintained neutrality in UN votes.
Yes. It was a powerful demonstration of how deeply committed India is to this independent foreign policy, even if it meant friction with key partners.
A willingness to endure the criticism.
Right. Rather than compromise on what they defined as core interests and their right to independent action, it set a very clear precedent. India wasn't going to be easily swayed.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. From geopolitics to economic independence. How is India reshaping trade and tech on its own terms?
This is another major front for strategic autonomy. It's not just about saying no on foreign policy. It's about actively carving out its own economic path.
Defining the rules and engagement.
Exactly. In trade talks, the message is consistent. India wants fair trade, not free trade on Western terms.
What does fair trade mean in this context? Protectionism.
It means protecting key domestic sectors. Agriculture is huge. Nascent manufacturing ensuring trade deals actually benefit India's economy and its vast population, not just opening markets wide for foreign competition before India is ready.
And we've seen this play out in major decisions.
Absolutely. Concrete examples. The big one was pulling out of RCEP in 2019.
The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, huge Asian trade bloc.
Massive. Nearly a third of global GDP. Walking away from that sent a powerful signal.
Why did they do it? Fear of Chinese imports flooding their market.
That was a major concern, yes. Potential harm to domestic agriculture and manufacturing outweighed the perceived benefits of deeper regional integration on those terms. They felt the deal wasn't balanced for India.
And at the WTO.
Similar story. Resisting certain agricultural reforms pushed by developed nations fearing they'd hurt India's millions of farmers.
And specific demands from the U.S. on tariffs.
Right. Pushback on demands to lower tariffs in sensitive sectors like dairy, IT, pharmaceuticals. India often insists market access has to be reciprocal, balanced. It's about safeguarding domestic producers, phasing in liberalization so industries can adapt.
It's not just passive resistance either, is it? They're willing to hit back.
That's a crucial development. They've shown they'll use retaliatory measures. The example cited is under the Trump administration.
When the U.S. threatened tariffs on steel and aluminum,
India responded directly. Retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, almonds, apples, walnuts, quite a list, stood their ground.
not backing down.
No. It signaled a shift, negotiating on a more equal footing. India is prepared to play hardball now.
It shows they're no longer willing to be seen as sort of a junior partner in these talks.
Exactly. Asserting the right to respond proportionally, demanding mutual respect. It underscores their confidence in their economic leverage and their commitment to autonomy in the economic sphere. Negotiations continue, but the dynamic has changed.
Okay, beyond traditional trade, there's the whole digital realm. Digital sovereignty and tech autonomy. What does that involve?
This is about India proactively taking control of its digital future, protecting data, fostering domestic tech, reducing reliance on foreign giants, setting its own digital terms.
How are they doing that? Specific policies?
Several key initiatives. One is local data storage laws, mandating that data related to Indian citizens generated in India has to be stored physically within India's borders.
Why is that important? Privacy.
Privacy is part of it, but it's also about control. Giving India greater jurisdiction over data, facilitating law enforcement access, enhancing national security by limiting external access to sensitive info, bringing data under national control.
And 5G. They're trying to build their own.
Intense push for 5G independence, yes. Developing indigenous tech, avoiding over-reliance on foreign vendors, especially from geopolitical rivals.
Right, excluding Huawei.
That was a major part of it. It's about securing critical infrastructure, preventing vulnerabilities in next-gen communication networks. National security is central there.
You also mentioned UPI, their payment system.
Yes. The Unified Payments Interface has been
Yeah.
revolutionary domestically. Instant, low-cost digital payments, even for tiny street vendors. A phenomenal public digital infrastructure.
And now they're promoting it internationally.
Actively. Across Asia, Africa, positioning it as a non-Western alternative to traditional payment networks. Shaping the global digital finance architecture with their own successful, inclusive model. Sharing the tech.
And looking further ahead, AI chips.
Big strategic investments there, aiming for self-sufficiency in these absolutely critical cutting-edge technologies.
Because true autonomy requires producing tech, not just consuming it.
That's the long-term vision. Mastering foundational technologies, reducing future dependence on global supply chains, becoming a creator, not just a user, in the global tech ecosystem.
But what's the impact on Western companies then?
Well, the net effect is clear. Western companies face increasing regulation. They have to adapt. India is prioritizing its own terms for digital sovereignty. It's a significant shift, sometimes challenging for established players used to fewer restrictions. India defining its digital destiny.
Let's shift again to internal governance and defense. These seem like areas where India is really pushing back against external scrutiny, redefining sovereignty for itself.
Yes, and this is often where things get particularly sensitive, even contentious.
How so?
Well, Western media, human rights groups, occasionally governments, frequently criticize India's internal affairs.
On issues like
Things like press freedom, the perceived treatment of minorities, Internet shutdowns in Kashmir that got a lot of attention, specific laws like the CAA or the farm reforms that led to protests.
And the criticism often comes from a Western liberal democratic viewpoint.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Implying India should adhere to universal standards, often defined primarily by the West.
But India pushes back strongly against this now.
Very strongly. The counter-narrative is robust. They often frame this external scrutiny as selective outrage, even hypocrisy.
Pointing fingers back at the critics?
Yes. Highlighting that critics often come from countries with their own democratic challenges, their own issues with minority rights or historical baggage, essentially saying, don't hold us to a standard you don't meet yourselves, rejecting being singled out.
Rejecting moral lectures, as you put it.
Exactly, and instead actively promoting this idea of civilizational democracy.
What does that mean?
The argument is that India's democracy is unique, organic, rooted in its own traditions. There's an ancient history of dialogue, consensus, societal harmony, not just a copy of Western liberalism.
So it doesn't need to conform to a Western template.
That's the core message. It's an assertion of India's distinct cultural, historical, political identity, saying our democracy is legitimate because it's authentically Indian. A profound statement of self-definition.
And interestingly, this external criticism seems to have an unintended effect.
It often does. Instead of pushing India to comply, it seems to paradoxically fuel nationalist consolidation.
Strengthens the government's hand.
It can. It reinforces the narrative that external forces are trying to interfere, undermine India's sovereignty. It leads to a rallying effect, strengthens public support for an independent path, validates the idea that India must rely on itself and its own values. External pressure backfiring in a way.
Okay, alongside this internal assertion, there's the defense diversification strategy, a very deliberate balancing act.
Absolutely. The core goal is crystal clear.
Yeah.
Not wanting to depend on any one bloc, west or east, for defense.
Maximum military independence. Avoid leverage points.
Precisely. It's pragmatic. In a volatile world, relying on one supplier makes you vulnerable to political pressure or supply disruptions.
Yeah, so we see them buying from the U.S.
And systems, yes. Seahawk helicopters, Predator drones, shows willingness to engage with the West, integrate top tech.
But also maintaining deep ties with Russia.
Yes. Historically, their biggest supplier. Crucial partnerships continue, like joint defense production. The BrahMos missile is a prime example. Historical ties and current strategic needs still matter. They aren't just switching suppliers.
It's a complex mix.
Very. Buying from the U.S., co-producing with Russia, collaborating with France and Israel on tech transfer.
And the big push for domestic production.
Huge. Accelerating investment in indigenous systems. Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India. The Tejas aircraft, Astra missiles.
Why is indigenous so vital for autonomy?
Reduces foreign reliance for critical hardware, builds India's industrial base, creates jobs, allows them to tailor systems to their specific needs and threats. It's fundamental for long-term strategic independence.
So the overall rationale is clear.
Diversification ensures security needs are met without compromising strategic autonomy. No single supplier holds all the cards. Maximum flexibility in foreign policy and national security. Charting their own course.
This leads perfectly into India's role, its growing role as a leader of the global South. It's not just resisting pressure anymore, it's actively shaping things.
This is a really important evolution, yes. India is increasingly positioning itself not just as an independent power, but as a voice, an influential leader of the global South.
Championing developing countries.
Giving voice to nations that often feel marginalized in global forums, advocating for a more equitable system, fostering collective agency.
And we saw this clearly during their G20 presidency.
Very clearly. They use that platform to push issues crucial to the global South. Sustainable development, debt relief, inclusive growth, right onto the main agenda, often surprising the established G7 powers.
The big symbolic win was the African Union joining the G20.
Huge. A major step towards broader, more representative global economic governance, directly challenging the old exclusivity, giving Africa a permanent seat at the table, a powerful statement about democratizing global structures driven by India.
And during COVID, vaccine equity.
India positioned itself as the pharmacy of the world, advocating for fair access to vaccines and resources for all nations, not just the rich ones. Initiatives like the Quad Vaccine Partnership highlighted this role.
Showing responsible global citizenship.
Yes, and also promoting its digital public infrastructure, UPI, Aadhaar across Asia and Africa.
Sharing its successful models.
Exactly. Offering open-source, inclusive tech so developing nations can build their own digital economies without relying solely on proprietary Western systems or getting locked into foreign tech ecosystems. Tech collaboration, not dependence.
So the leadership model India's pushing is explicitly different.
Described as non-Western, inclusive, and pragmatic, it's directly challenging old power structures. The UN Security Council's makeup, the Bretton Woods institutions aiming for a multilateralism that reflects today's multipolar reality, not just the post-World War II order.
It seems like a mix of self-interest and collective interest.
It's an effective blend. India's own rise gives it the credibility to champion the global South. Doing so reinforces its own global standing and legitimacy. It expands its influence while addressing perceived global imbalances. It's strategic leadership, enabling others while strengthening itself.
So wrapping this all up, this deep dive makes it incredibly clear. India's response to external pressure, especially from the West, isn't about isolation.
Far from it. It's assertive, it's self-respecting, and it's deeply rooted in the reality of a changing world order.
The transformation is profound, from a nation largely adapting to global rules
to one that is actively shaping them. India is, as the sources put it, no longer a rule taker, it's becoming a rule shaper. That's the fundamental shift.
And that completely reframes the challenge, doesn't it? Especially for the West.
Absolutely. The old question, why won't India fall in line? That assumes a hierarchy, an expectation of deference that India flatly rejects now.
So the question has to change.
It must. The real question for Western powers, and indeed for everyone, is how do we effectively work with an India that's charting its own fiercely independent course?
It requires a whole new approach, recognizing India's distinct logic.
Yes. A reevaluation of diplomacy, an acceptance of India as a truly independent, powerful player with its own strategic calculus. And for you, the listener, understanding this shift is vital.
For making sense of international relations, geopolitics.
Exactly. For understanding the future landscape, the world isn't binary anymore. Powerful new centers are defining their own paths.
Which brings us to a final thought, something for you to chew on.
Mm-hmm.
As India keeps championing this multipolar world and promoting its own distinct civilizational democracy model, what implications might that have for the global conversation around human rights and governance? Could it genuinely start to move the needle beyond purely Western liberal frameworks, maybe creating new norms?
That is a profound question for our rapidly changing world.
Something to think about. Until next time, stay informed, stay sharp, and keep diving deep with us.